When Trump hit the campaign trail 9 years ago, one of the phrases he began using was fake news, which irritated the left to no end. While they vilified him for it, it was actually Obama and the left who started using such rhetoric during that administration, calling Fox News faux news and relentlessly targeting the outlet. Behavior the media not only didn't mind, they applauded and even replicated themselves. It wasn't until Trump turned the attention and insults back on them did they find it offensive, crude, and unpresidential. Regardless, we've been dealing with fake news since before the country formed, with it becoming standard operating procedure a little over 125 years ago thanks to Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. The two Democrat newspaper moguls organized, perfected, and packaged fake news while starting a completely manufactured war, a process legacy media continues today. Rosie the Riveter here, dropping more truth bombs to destroy fake news and propaganda. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to get new videos when they are uploaded. Now, let's get into today's riveting topic. Hungarian-born Joseph Pulitzer immigrated to America in 1864 as a Union Army draftee substitute. Following the Civil War, he started a career in journalism, which included newspaper ownership. Supporting the Liberal Republican Party in the 1870s, he became a lifelong Democrat following that party's dissolution. In 1878, Pulitzer married Democrat Confederate President Jefferson Davis's niece, Kate Davis. The couple moved to New York City in 1883, where Pulitzer purchased New York World, a paper that purposely interfered in the 1864 presidential election by publishing a completely made-up pamphlet and story in efforts to discredit Abraham Lincoln and move voters away from him. Do you honestly think the Steele dossier and the Russian hoax against Trump was unprecedented? Pulitzer quickly turned his newspaper into a strong leading Democrat publication. Keen investigative reporting regarding political corruption, fraud, and abuses of power drove Pulitzer, yet it was the addition of a cartoonist that sent his circulation skyrocketing. On the other side of the country, William Randolph Hearst began running his father's San Francisco Examiner in 1887, a paper founded as the Democrat Press in 1863, an anti-Lincoln publication which pushed pro-Democratic Party, pro-slavery, and pro-Confederacy views. Inspired by Pulitzer's career, Hearst grew the paper with better equipment and writers such as Mark Twain and Jack London, while Pulitzer expanded his business by creating the Evening World. Wanting to overtake the newspaper industry, Hearst moved to New York and purchased the formerly Pulitzer-owned New York Morning Journal in 1875. Like his mentor, Hearst soon began an additional evening publication and also used his papers to further his Democrat viewpoints. Before long, the two newspaper giants were fierce competitors, waging war on each other by lowering prices and hiring better cartoonists. Hearst stole Richard F. Outcault from Pulitzer, a cartoonist known for his The Yellow Kid series. Pulitzer replaced him with George G. Lux, who continued the uncopywritten cartoon in his paper. Featuring characters in bright yellow outfits, the cartoons were printed in color so as to attract readers, which they kept interested by flooding the publications with sensational and dramatic headlines, pictures, and reporting. The whole over-the-top production was coined yellow journalism and is the genesis of today's fake news. Waging war on each other only got them so far, though. If they wanted to really bolster their readership, they needed a real war. So, since there was no conflicts at the time, the publishers decided to manufacture one on their own, organizing their own propaganda campaign in 1898 through articles and cartoons purposely designed to stir strife against Cuba and Spain. So much for honest investigative journalism. Hearst sent popular illustrator Friedrich Remington to Cuba to find a story. Before long, Remington cabled Hearst, "Everything quiet. There is no trouble here. There will be no war. Wish to return." Hearst responded, "Please remain. You furnish the pictures, and I'll furnish the war." And so it began. On February 15, 1898, the USS Maine mysteriously exploded and sank in Havana Harbor, Cuba. Immediately, reports and pictures incriminating Spain began circulating despite any evidence of foul play, while editors purposely censored all information on the ship's known existing problems. Only given false and misleading information with important facts deliberately withheld, Americans demanded intervention. It wasn't until an actual investigation was conducted was it discovered the likely cause of the blast was due to the accidental explosion of 5 tons of gunpowder on the ship. Regardless, the newspaper moguls had found a cash cow, and they weren't about to come clean to the public. In fact, one of the most well-known yellow journalism cartoons depicts the two publishers taking credit for furnishing the Spanish-American War. Fast forward to today. Up until Putin invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, mainstream media actually did stories on the corruption within Ukraine. As you can see, it was widely known and reported on for years, including by publications such as The Guardian and the Huffington Post, that Ukraine was completely corrupt. Articles were published exposing the Azov Battalion, the leading military force in Ukraine, started by real Nazis that fled Germany after World War II. They still hold their German nationalist socialist views today and control Ukraine's military. However, after the conflict started, all concerns against the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion were immediately forgotten. In fact, they were forgiven and endorsed by those who still continue to accuse Trump and MAGA of supporting neo-Nazis. In reality, much of Ukraine's corruption had started exactly 8 years earlier, which led to Putin annexing Crimea in 2014. The EU was pressuring President Yanukovych to sign a political association and trade agreement, which would have forced Ukraine to make major changes in their regulations and laws. Russia countered with their own agreement, which was supported by eastern Ukraine, including Crimea. Yanukovych declined the EU's agreement in November of 2013, immediately prompting violent protests from pro-European Ukrainians who were funded by European countries and America to invade and overtake government buildings. By mid-February 2014, the deadly protest climaxed at the Ukrainian parliament. Despite signing a compromise with the opposition, which included releasing violent protesters who had been arrested or were still occupying buildings, Parliament voted to remove President Yanukovych on February 22nd, a coup Europe and Obama supported, which is no surprise considering Kamala Harris raised money to bail out violent 2022 rioters who were all released with their charges dropped, while J6 protesters continue to be sentenced for years in jail. In the East, 95% of Crimeans supported Russia, leading to Putin beginning action to annex it within a week. At the time, Obama actually told Ukraine not to resist Putin so as to not upset him. However, Obama and Biden both backed NATO, taking steps to include Ukraine, which they knew would force Putin to attack in 2022. Right before Putin acted, Biden addressed the nation, claiming NATO and the U.S. would have to discuss the response if the invasion was just a minor incursion. Why would both Obama and Biden be soft on Putin before he goes in, then insist on massive action after? Here's more fun facts about Ukraine and the deep state. Did you know Obama funded bioweapons labs in Ukraine? Did you know Hunter Biden was also involved in bioweapons in Ukraine, including providing funding for deadly pathogen research? Did you know Putin targeted those bioweapons labs when he invaded Ukraine in 2022, not wanting such weapons at his doorstep? Is this why the Democrats and media are so vilifying Putin while the U.S. scrubs their connections to the biolabs? Speaking of Hunter Biden, it was well known he was on the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian holding firm for energy companies. He used his father's connections to benefit not only Burisma, which they all lied about doing, they also blackmailed Burisma, allowing Hunter to pocket millions of dollars for himself and his family. Never heard this? That's because, like Hearst and Pulitzer, all this vital information was purposely hidden, suppressed, misreported, and withheld from the American people by the mainstream media. An honest prosecutor in Ukraine was actually investigating Burisma until this happened.
No, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
In case you were wondering, that is an example of an actual quid pro quo. And it's what Trump suggested Zelensky should maybe look into during their infamous phone call. I'm sure we all remember who Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat-controlled House chose to impeach for quid pro quo. But the Bidens aren't the only deep state elitists financially benefiting from Ukraine with suspect appointments. Others include Nancy Pelosi, Mitt Romney, and John Kerry. In fact, there are multiple deep state players with their hands all over dirty Ukrainian deals. Still wondering why they all insist on endless funding to Zelensky? Even George Soros admits Biden was very deeply involved in Ukraine. While the media continues to insist Trump colluded with Russia, which has been totally and completely debunked, why aren't they telling you the Democrats actually did collude with Ukraine in 2016? Did you know any of this before you changed your social media icon to the Ukraine flag? If you had been given all this information, would you have insisted we continue to send them billions and billions of dollars and fund an endless war? After years of demonizing Republicans, calling them warmongers, demanding we should not be policing the world, why is it the media, Democrats, and Hollywood all jumped on board immediately, supporting Ukrainian flags, backing the Azov battalion, and calling for an endless stream of money flowing to Zelensky, all while degrading Americans displaying the American flags as traitorous Trump-supporting Nazis who are a threat to our democracy for wanting to stay out of it? Do you think this is new, folks? Do you think this is real, folks? How about Black Lives Matter? Did you change your icon to a black square during the 2020 Summer of Love because you had any clue about the group? Or were you just blindly following the media in Hollywood who told you to? I do a deep dive into that propaganda movement in my video linked below, and it's worth a look. Going back to Pulitzer and Hertz, the men continued to grow their influence in journalism, such as starting journalism schools. Per his will, Pulitzer provided money to Columbia University to establish a journalism school as well as the Pulitzer Prize in Journalism. Despite Pulitzer's established involvement in yellow journalism, the Pulitzer Prize became a coveted honor, one that was awarded to those who showed exceptionalism in journalism. But is it? Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein are known for their Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporting in the early 1970s regarding the Watergate scandal. Yet, after 50 years, evidence is surfacing that confirms Watergate was in fact a CIA operation and was used by newspapers to oust Nixon, who was as despised by the Democrats then as Trump is today, while covering up scandals within the Democratic Party. As reported by Blaze Media, when Trump was elected, a prominent journalism school dean confidently told his students, "Don't worry, we'll Watergate him." In 2016, Bob Woodward proudly told adoring pundits that he was putting 20 Post reporters on the Trump beat. And wouldn't you know it, reporters for the Washington Post and New York Times received Pulitzers for their stories on the Russian coverage, which turned out to be a totally manufactured event. Looks like Pulitzer Prizes have been used as part of the yellow journalism propaganda machine all along. Thanks for the confirmation, Woodward. All this may also explain why the elites claim citizen journalists, who do their own investigations and report their findings, aren't real journalists. Those who were indoctrinated in yellow journalism schools and taught to provide the pictures so the publications can produce the wars can't afford to have the truth out there. Yellow journalism became powerful during the 20th century, with Obama's progressive administration unleashing the practice in 2012 by repealing the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, allowing propaganda to be legally used against the American people. Obama's chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, stated,
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
with that, everything the mainstream media, who are still just shills for the Democratic Party and the deep state, and the leftists who were in charge, anything they thought would be beneficial became a crisis. Realize, these are not two separate entities with the media monitoring the government. They are one powerful force with the watchdog helping the wolves devour the sheep. Remember, Obama completely subscribed to the writings of radical communist Saul Alinsky, who was also the admired subject of Hillary Clinton's college thesis. In Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, he wrote, "Accuse your opponent of what you are doing to create confusion and to inculcate voters against evidence of your guilt." In 1916, President Woodrow Wilson ran for re-election on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." Before he was even sworn in to his second term, we were in World War I. Interestingly, many historians contribute the sinking of the Lusitania as a start of America heading to war. Yet it was the conveniently timed revelation of the Zimmerman telegram that gave Wilson the cover to ask Congress to declare war with the backing of the American people. More ships were sunk on December 7, 1941, which President Franklin D. Roosevelt proclaimed would be a date which will live in infamy, before asking Congress again to join the world in war. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted name in news, turned the entire American view of the Vietnam War on its head with an outright lie. America achieved a 10-1 victory in the Tet Offensive, but Cronkite contributed that victory to the communist North Vietnam. With that, it split the American people right down the middle, pitting anti-war activists against those who were still supporting our military and government. As the National Review reported at the 50th anniversary of the Tet Offensive, America's first major encounter with the big lie, with all its disastrous consequences, started 50 years ago today when the American mainstream media, CBS and the other networks, plus the New York Times and the Washington Post, decided to turn the major communist Tet Offensive against U.S. forces in South Vietnam on January 30th, 1968 into an American defeat, rather than what it actually was, a major American victory. When the American embassy was overrun in Benghazi on September 11, 2012, the media regurgitated Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's claim that it was because of a virtually unseen video that mocked Muhammad. Despite the Libyan and Egyptian presidents never mentioning it and then denying the attack had anything to do with the YouTube video, the media continued to allow Clinton to repeat the lie for weeks. But not only did the media manipulate the people, they manipulated the CIA as well.
They were doing what they were doing.
No. Again, we were misled that there were supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact.
But
and the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Well, the difference is whether you should be tried for treason, sedition, and or insurrection, Ms. Clinton. Hillary's private correspondence that evening proved she knew without a doubt it was a terrorist attack, yet the complicit media still defended and covered up for her lies as long as they could. The truth is Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration were illegally selling arms to jihadists and terrorists, which strengthened al-Qaeda, allowing them to reorganize as ISIS. To cover this up, the government prosecuted and jailed the filmmaker of the supposed dangerous video only a handful of people saw, ruining his life just to save Hillary and Obama. They also pursued an American arms dealer, trying to make him a scapegoat until realizing it would expose Hillary's involvement if they continued their lawfare. I won't even get started on September 11th at this time. That's a deep dive all on its own. I used to accept all of this at face value, but now that I'm awake, I have to ask, what did they know, when did they know it, and what did they keep from us, as I don't trust any of it anymore. The world is on fire. Efforts to keep the war going in Ukraine persist in Congress and the media, even though Putin and Zelensky have both expressed desires to talk to Trump, as he promises to end it. The conflict in the Middle East continues on as pro-Palestinians, including our own congresspeople, insist the only acceptable ending is the annihilation of Israel. What information are they hiding and manipulating with this conflict? And the tensions between China and Taiwan continue to increase as they see the leadership in America becoming too weak to stop an invasion. Meanwhile, as the deep state controls the media puppet strings, they continue to project that it's all Trump's fault and the world would implode if he is reelected. As Trump, the only president in 72 years not to get us involved in a military conflict, calls for peace while the current administration continues to push and fund war, what evidence gives even a hint that they are peacemakers and Trump is the warmonger? When the Ukraine war started, we were given photographs, but so many turned out to be fake. You provide the picture, and I'll provide the war. Remember? And now that the media and the government are in bed together, how low will they go to manipulate the people? But have you noticed that after the first year or so, the pictures basically stopped? Where's the evidence of the conflict we are spending billions of dollars on? Apparently, once it's started, you don't even need the pictures anymore. Which begs me to ask, what is really happening? Are we being fed a bunch of lies about sinking ships when the truth is, it's the powers that be are lighting the fuse? Seriously, these people have no new tricks in their playbook. As we are dangerously heading towards World War III, the media tried to gaslight the American people with fraudulent reports of Russia sinking a Ukrainian ship. Seems like the more things change, the more they stay the same. A lot of people are getting rich, not just off the news, but because of the profits from war. What's unforgivable is that while the reasons for war may have been faked, the blood shed by our soldiers and the soldiers of all the countries involved, not to mention all innocent civilians caught in the crossfire, is not fake. Neither are the 22 military lives taken daily by their own hand due to PTSD and other mental issues. That is all 100% real. Realize we are nothing more than expendable pawns in their real-life game of Risk. It's time these people are held accountable for their lies and fake news before the world is destroyed because of their lust for power and control. I'm Rosie the Riveter, and that's my 2 cents. But what do you think? Leave your comments down below. If you enjoy my content, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. You can find all my videos and my blog, Liberating Letters, at thefactspaper.com. You can also start your own research on the Facts Paper by exploring the thousands of links to articles I have, including those noted in my videos, sharing the truth fake news propagandists won't. Investigate and discover the truth for yourself.